Welcome back to Forum 13. I'm Phil Bailey. It is a terrible disease, robbing you of the very breath you take. We are joined by Lynn Marie Paris and John Franklin of the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. Thank you both very much for joining us. Are children more likely to have cystic fibrosis than adults?
It's a genetic disease, so you are born with it. You can't catch it. Both parents have to be carriers of the genetic defect in order for a child to have it. If both parents are carriers, they have about a 1 in 4 chance of having a child with cystic fibrosis. So yes, you are born with it.
On your website I read in the 1950s, and Lynn Marie actually, we'll talk to you more about this. On the website I read, in the 1950s a child was lucky to live to elementary school age. What can you tell me about life expectancy now and after? Actually, you both have stories that relate to this, but well, answer that question first, and then I want to talk to you about your personal story.
Okay. Now, the average life expectancy is almost 40 and going up, thanks to the research that's being done constantly.
Now, Lynn Marie, tell us your story, why you got involved in cystic fibrosis.
Well, my sister was born in the 1960s, and at that time the life expectancy was 8. And now, as he said, it's almost 40 years old. So when my sister was at Albany Med, there was only a child care center because that's all there was a need for. And the medicine has come so far, and the promise of this medicine and the cure is so exciting. I want to help children and adults who now have CF and to help find a cure.
Your sister was how old when she passed away?
Almost 16 years old.
And John, I mentioned this because you have a daughter.
That's correct.
Right, and she has far exceeded this 16-year period.
She was born in 1983, and at that time they said, well, she might live to be 15 or 16 years of age. There wasn't a lot of research going on. We did have the beginnings of treatment centers that the foundation was establishing across the country. One is at Albany Med. Since that time, a lot of research has been going on with trying to treat the symptoms of cystic fibrosis, and that has been very effective. She's now 31 and doing pretty well.
So does that speak to some of the work Cystic Fibrosis Foundation has done, helping raise awareness and I would assume funding?
Yeah, our goals are to raise awareness, to find a cure for cystic fibrosis, and to make sure that there is quality of care available to all patients with cystic fibrosis in the country. Yeah. So yeah, they're important tasks for us.
What are the symptoms of cystic fibrosis?
Primarily, it affects any part of the body where there's mucus, primarily the lungs, because with cystic fibrosis you don't clear your lungs very well. Lynn Marie will show you an example in a minute about how difficult it is. So because mucus builds up in there, it becomes a breeding ground for infection. And those infections are hard to treat. Fortunately, antibiotics have been coming along, being developed, so that, you know, my daughter's been able to stay healthy enough to keep going, and that's one of the big reasons. But you've got a good example on what it's like to breathe with cystic fibrosis.
Well, yes, they compare breathing with cystic fibrosis to trying to breathe through a mixing straw, like a drink or a coffee mixer. And now with this new medicine out, Kalydeco, they say it makes people symptomless, and so now it's like they can breathe normal. So it's almost like going from a drinking straw to a regular straw.
Someday try this little experiment. You breathe about 15,000 times a day, and you don't even realize it. Try for a minute or two just taking breaths through a coffee straw and see how much different it is to breathe that for a couple of minutes that way.
Did I also read that though patients with cystic fibrosis also are more vulnerable to other diseases?
Well, when you're ill, when you're in the hospital, you are compromised. Your immune system is compromised. But yeah, there are diabetics. There's a special type of diabetes
associated with
CF. Yes. So it's things like that. Yes. There can be liver issues and things of that nature because of all the medications that are being taken. So yeah, there are other issues that could come up with cystic fibrosis.
And also weight loss, because they're not absorbing nutrients. So for example, when my sister passed at the age of 16, it wasn't just the lungs, it's just the absorption of the food and the calories. So she was only 67 pounds at the age of 16. So it does wreak havoc on the entire body, not just the lungs.
Yeah. I saw a figure on your website says 30,000 children in this country with cystic fibrosis, 70,000 worldwide.
That's right.
Does that mean that would tell us nearly half of the world's cases are in the U.S.?
Pretty
Is this
much.
a disease more prone to the United States?
Not necessarily. It's genetic. Northern Europeans, a lot of Northern Europeans tend to have the genetic defect. So, but no, it's not necessarily part of the United States. The good news of that number is that now nearly half of the patients with cystic fibrosis are adults, where that wasn't the case, yes. See, we've got a real success story to tell because of all the research that's being done. The cystic fibrosis about 10 or 15 years ago decided to dedicate a lot of funding to go out and buy the science, because pharmaceutical companies and research companies weren't spending a lot of time on cystic fibrosis because it's a rare disease. It's considered a rare disease. Yeah. So thanks to that type of research investment, we've got drugs now that are taking care of things. 2 years ago, we came up with the first drug that actually treats the cause of cystic fibrosis, treats the defect, so that about 3 or 4% of the patients with cystic fibrosis are now taking that drug every day and can breathe fairly normally, if not normally.
And does that suggest, that figure you offer, does that suggest fewer children are being born?
No.
Okay.
We can't, tell that.
Right.
But so no, I can't really say.
Is there better screening?
There's very good screening in New York State. Cystic fibrosis is part of the newborn screening program, so that every child born in New York State is screened for cystic fibrosis. And if that test comes up positive, then they are more thoroughly screened to ensure that it is in fact the case. So you're getting it earlier and earlier. My daughter was diagnosed at 6 months because we had a pediatrician who was aware of cystic fibrosis and knew what to look for. And she's getting recurring lung infections. So he said, we better test her. And back then, the test was a sweat test, because patients with cystic fibrosis have a lot more salt on their skin because you're not clearing it properly, because you don't get, things are thick and sticky. So she was tested and turned positive at 6 months. Thankfully, we had a pediatrician who knew what to look for.
All right. And early diagnosis, as in so many diseases, is a better outcome.
Absolutely.
Because you can start treating it?
Especially with the drugs that we have now. It's a much better outcome.
Yeah. Are there other ways to better the lifestyle of somebody who is dealing with cystic fibrosis, such as diet?
We work with nutritionists at the centers, at the cystic fibrosis centers, such as at Albany, and I think diet's important with anybody. They have much better nutrition now because they've got pills that they can take that helps them absorb the nutrients. But nutritionists work with them. Just exercise is extremely important.
Exercise is important?
Absolutely. Yeah, move that stuff out of your lungs.
Avoid secondhand smoke.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And my sister as a child had to sleep in a mist tent because of the mucus, the humidity is something to help get that out. And then doing the physical therapy, she had to have physical therapy. My mom would have to do pounding on her chest in all different positions and helping.
Turn them upside down, pat their backs and stuff.
Are cystic fibrosis patients better off in a warm, humid climate then?
Actually, the ocean is a good place to be. Humidity is not necessarily a good thing, but they found that salt air helps them a lot, and they've developed treatments, saline treatments, to help create that effect. And I'm not sure why.
Is it better or worse? Is there a difference between being on Long Island Sound or being on the Gulf of Mexico?
Yes. Yeah, there's a difference between being in the mountains where the air is clear or being in Florida where it's very humid all the time. Those types of things do affect, yes.
All right. Better in the mountains?
Yep, clear air.
Okay. And what about the Gulf or Long Island Sound? Okay. I would guess parents with a child who is newly diagnosed with cystic fibrosis are probably completely caught off guard and wondering, where do I start? Where do I turn? Is this something that your group works with?
Yeah, there's a lot of information available on the website, cff.org, about cystic fibrosis. We're fortunate to have a treatment center here at Albany Medical Center. There are social workers available. There are support groups available. There are groups available for new parents, new parents telling new parents about what to do and things of that nature. So yes, there's a lot of help available out there.
Yeah.
And they can also go on the site and look at the drug pipeline, which is a list of all of the research that's going on. It gives you a lot of hope when you see all of the things that we're working on to try and cure cystic fibrosis.
And we're seeing those parents get involved in, you know, in our events. Like we just had November 1st, we had Autumn Mix and Mingle, which is going to be October 24th next year, and that was one of our big fundraisers. And at that event, I met a family who has a 9-month-old who has just obviously recently been diagnosed, and so we're doing the stair climb in March, I believe.
I think it's March this year.
So climbing Corning Tower, and every year I do it by myself, but this year I'm hoping to do it for this 9-month-old.
Fantastic. And I'm sure the support groups must be important. I mean, it must be these parents who are new. I mean, they're guaranteed they're going to see their child suffer, and that's going to be just
It's a scary thing, and knowledge is power. Yeah. So the more you can learn about it, and the more you can learn about what happens, you know. Cystic fibrosis patients go through about a 2-hour regimen every day. And especially when they get older, you know, when they're in a college dorm, that fortunately the technology is such that they can do they have a vest that they put on that helps clear their lungs. It vibrates and moves the mucus into the larger airways. There's a lot of medications to take, and there's a lot of, you know, they stay on their health, and they can stay pretty healthy.
These breakthroughs in medication, are these medicines covered by insurance?
By and large, yes.
Good. Now, what do you do? You're a nonprofit. Where do you get your funding? How can viewers help you?
We get our funding through fundraisers, through going to events. Probably the biggest event we have every year is our Great Strides Walk, which is held throughout the northeastern New York region. Sign up for that. It's a very big family event. You go for a walk, you raise money, you get donations.
And when is that?
That's in May. I'm not sure the exact date next year.
But again, they can go to your website.
cff.org and click.
It's also on various locations too. Like
Right.
we have them it's not just one day. It's usually like 3 or 4 weekends at 4 or 5 different locations. So it's convenient for many people to do.
Yeah, you can find the Northeastern New York chapter by clicking on Find a chapter on the main website, and that will list all of our events throughout the year.
All right, we're going to provide a link on our website too at wnyt.com, so you can get involved with the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. You can go to them for help. You can find information on these fundraisers you have coming up, including the stair climb, which sounds like a lot of fun. I wish you the best of luck. All right.
Going down is easier.
Yeah.
That's the elevator.
Sometimes, yeah. Well, thank you both very much for joining us. Lynn Marie Paris and John Franklin with the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. Thank you for joining us on Forum 13. I'm Phil Bailey. We'll see you next week.